Hello everyone and welcome to a very nice game from yesterday's Champions Chester CrunchLabs Masters, Magnus Carlsen versus Maxime Vachier-Lagrave. It's been a while since I've shown a Magnus game, and this is a pretty important one as it was a pretty crazy match. First Magnus took the lead, then Maxime retaliated, then Maxime took the lead, and then Magnus won on demand to force Armageddon, and this is now the Armageddon game where Magnus will get 10 minutes, he has the white pieces, and Maxime will get 7 minutes, he has black, but a draw is sufficient for him to win the match. And yeah, pretty cool game. It's always enjoyable watching both of these guys play. Let's check it out. So Magnus with white opens with pawn to e4, and even though Maxime only needs a draw, when you challenge Maxime to an e4 game, he will reply with pawn to c5. He goes for the Sicilian defense, and now let's see what Magnus plays against the Sicilian when he needs a win. Knight to f3, we have pawn to d6 and bishop to b5 check. He goes for the canal attack, and I don't know, whenever, I imagine someone needs to play for a win against the Sicilian, in my mind, I see the Knight of Sicilian, and it is a very risky, opening to play, but I guess Magnus just respects Maxime too much, and especially his Nairov. He is considered one of the greatest Nairov players in the world, if not the best, and tries to surprise him with bishop to b5 check. We have bishop to d7, captures, and now pawn to d4. Grabbing the center, we have c captures, knight captures, or so you would think. Magnus goes for queen captures on d4. It's a very rare move, but it has been played on occasion. Knight to c6, attacks the queen, queen to d3, and pawn to g6. Maxime now ready to fianchetto his dragon. Pawn to c4, grabbing hold of the d5 square, so it's gonna be that kind of a game where Maxime will have some problems pushing e6 or e5. If he does, d6 will be weak for the rest of the game, but that's where you recognize a strong Sicilian player, if he knows how to play around this d6 weakness. We have bishop to g7, and there are some games, for example, knight to c3 is a known move, but Magnus castles kingside, and it is now as of move 9 that we have a completely new game. So yes, here, move 9, completely new game. Fabi versus Alireza, move 9, end of the game. We have knight to f6, continuing development, h3, and now castles kingside. Knight to c3, pawn to a6, taking away the b5 square from the knight, also preparing b5 in some future installments, rook to d1, and queen to e6. It's hard to say if Maxime has this prepared, but he is playing so quickly that he probably does. I mean, he started with 7 minutes, he spent maybe 20 seconds reaching this position, and okay, it could mean many things. He could be preparing to pile up on that c4 pawn, and also the queen gets away from d7 if the d file opens up. We have bishop to e3 by Magnus, knight to b4, attacks the queen, and now queen back to b1. Magnus offers the c4 pawn, and Maxime declines it. He just plays rook f to c8, but I want to show you this line, even though okay, it's a rapid game, so we're not going to show too many lines, but this is one that I will show. What happens if you capture on c4? Well, the problem is rook d4. And okay, you have to defend your knight. You might think, well, nothing to it. We're just going to play queen to c5. But now a3 attacks the knight, and after you play knight to c6, which is your only square, here comes rook to d5. And that is the problem. And you can't move the queen. If you move the queen, knight d2, and the queen now truly is trapped. So here you would have to capture on d5 with the knight. And after bishop captures on c5, you capture on c3, attack white's queen, and after b captures, d captures on c5. And you have a rook and bishop for a queen, and the position plays itself on. Queen captures on b7, attacks the knight. Bishop captures on c3, attacks the rook. Now rook c1, you might be thinking, all right, but now two of my pieces are hanging. No, knight d4, defending the bishop with a tactic of knight e2 check to win the bishop. And after king to f1, now you, let's say, play knight captures, pawn captures, and you solidify here, and you have a rook and bishop versus a queen, and a very hard position to break through. So even if Maxime went into this, it's hard to say if Magnus would be able to win this. But, he did try it as maybe a surprise. Again, I imagine Magnus does not know how to play this because he already burned 5 minutes reaching this position. We have rook f to c8, and when I say he doesn't know how to play this, of course he knows how to play these positions, but maybe this particular position is the one that he hasn't seen before. So pawn to b3, defending the c4 pawn and pawn to b5. Now Maxime just goes for that c4 pawn. Knight to d4 attacks the queen, and queen just returns to the d7 square. We have pawn to a3, challenges the knight, knight c6, and c captures on b5. So of course you need the b5 square protected, knight captures on d4, bishop captures, and a captures on b5. And Magnus should be very happy with his position here. He did catch up on time with Maxime. They're both now down to below 5 minutes, but he does have 2 against 1 on the queen side. So if this reaches some sort of an endgame, let's say he has a dark square bishop, he manages to create a passed a pawn and push it, could be good for him. We have queen to d3, putting pressure on the b5 pawn, and rook a to b8 defending. Rook a to c1, and now queen to b7, probably preparing pawn to b4, so Magnus stops at pawn to b4 himself, and bishop to h6. Goes after the rook on c1, rook to b1, and now pawn to e5. As the bishop here serves as a target, you do not have time for queen captures on d6, and this is how Maxime manages to advance the e-pawn. With bishop to e3, bishop captures, queen captures, and now queen to b6. Maxime offers a queen trade and prepares to create some sort of a defense here around the d6 pawn. So of course Magnus declines the trade, queen f3, king to g7, defends the knight. We have rook to d3, and now rook to c6, adding another defender here, rook b to d1, adding another attacker, and rook b to c8. Now rook captures on c3 is a possibility if the rook ever moves, or the queen. And Magnus should really consider pawn to a4 here. Again, with perfect play, it's probably a draw, but having a passed pawn on b5 does look very nice, and also you can't really move the rook. If you move the rook, then rook captures on d6, queen captures on f6, so Maxime would have to give up the exchange here, and of course Maxime would happily do so. If Maxime sees even a glimpse of an opportunity to sacrifice the exchange, you better believe that Maxime will do it. Queen captures, let's say queen captures on b5, and you play this position, you defend e4, and okay, you have a rook versus a knight, but Maxime would have the passed a pawn, so it's pretty tricky. There's also the weakness on d6, but it's hard to say how relevant it is here. Definitely a possibility. But Magnus goes g4. He wants to play g5 and win the d5 square for his own knight. As long as the knight is on f6, is just ready to trade for that knight if it reaches d5. Pawn to h6, stopping g5. Pawn to h4. Magnus prepares pawn to g5. We have queen to b8. And king to g2. We have rook to a6, now preparing to go after the a3 pawn, and pawn to g5, kicking away the knight, winning the d5 square, and then the rook will defend the a3 pawn. So knight to h5, knight to d5, and now queen to a7. Maxime now says, all right, I'm just going to triple up here and win your a3 pawn. Magnus goes to rook 1 to d2. Magnus's idea is that, okay, if you go rook to a8, maybe I can play rook to c2, and then rook to c7. Looks like a very nice idea, but Maxime says, nope, I'm actually going to go for the active idea, rook to c1. And okay, you still don't have access to the c file. We have queen to e3, or just offering a queen trade. And believe it or not, it looks like a crazy position, but queen e3 is in fact the top move recommended by the engine. So okay, Maxime trades. We have captures, not captures. Of course, you want to keep this knight away from f4, so pawn captures. And now look what Magnus did. He took away all of the squares for this knight. So unless the king moves and then you bring the knight to g7 and somehow remaneuver it, that knight for the moment is stuck on h5. We have h captures on g5, h captures, and rook a to c6. Doubling up on the c file, rook to f2, and now rook to a1, preparing to put pressure on the a3 pawn, but also maybe rook to c1 will be a nice idea. We have rook to b3 by Magnus, and here it's already very hard to decide what to play. Probably best is to sacrifice a pawn with rook c3, and then after, let's say, captures, rook captures on a3, you bring the knight back, and okay, the b4 pawn is defended, you are down a pawn, but maybe this knight will take, longer to get into the game, and maybe you can create some threats against, let's say, the d6 pawn or something like that. But objectively, it is most certainly a draw. So after rook to a1, Magnus played rook to b3, and now he allows Maxime to really grab hold of the position. We have rook c to c1, king to f3 by Magnus, and now rook to g1, putting pressure on the g5 pawn, and knight to c3 by Magnus. Thinking Maxime is just going after the g5 pawn, and even though that's a fine move, there is a much finer one. So feel free to pause the video and win the game for Maxime while I give you a couple of seconds. seconds. For those of you who were able to do it, congratulations on completing the mating web. And for those of you who just want to enjoy the show, it is rook 8 to e1. Taking away the e2 square from the white king, and now look at this. The white king has nowhere to go. That means rook to g3 will be checkmate. So Magnus has to free up the f2 square. He moves the rook. Rook to e2 is best, just offering a rook trade, even though the position would still be winning for Maxime. Magnus played rook to h2, and now Maxime just played rook to g3 check. We have king to f2, and now rook e captures on e3, and he was in this position on move 43 that Magnus Carlsen resigned the game, as there is nothing more to be done here. So it was truly a great battle. Like I said, Maxime took the lead. Magnus took the lead. Then Maxime retaliated in game 2, also won game 3. Magnus won on demand in game 4, and now, well, you've seen what happened here. Maxime, I would say, completely dominated the game. There were positions where Magnus could have played more actively and went for a better move, but I mean, Maxime just outplayed him. And also one of the, I mean, you've seen once again why Maxime is considered the best, maybe not the Sicilian, but Sicilian Najdorf player definitely, but also one of the best Sicilian players in the world. But yeah, I'm guessing if Magnus wanted to play for the win, he should have challenged him to a Najdorf. You know, the gloves would come off and we would get a crazy game, and I believe Magnus's chances of winning would be greater there. But okay, I mean, he knows best, of course, and this is what he decided to do. Great win for Maxime, and Maxime is going into the finals, where he will meet the winner of the semi-final match between Alireza Firuza and Young Krzysztof Duda. Alireza won, and it will be Alireza versus MVL, the battle of the two Frenchmen once again, and we'll see who emerges victorious. And this is a funny quote I've chosen for this game. Chess is a cold bath for the mind, by Sir John Simon, and it's hard to say what he meant by this, whether it's a potential shock for the body, or maybe that it has some refreshing and invigorating maybe moments. Maybe it's going to be a great experience for you. It's hard to say. What do you think he meant by this? You know, is it the first or the latter? So yeah, that's the game. Hope you guys enjoyed it. Very nicely played by Maxime. Always a pleasure watching him, wield the Sicilian defense. I would like to thank Kevin O'Grady, James Eugene Cashman, Peter I. Bilic, an anonymous person, and Ahmad Soita for your contribution to my channel. Thank you a lot. I really appreciate it. As usual, you can check 2 of my previous videos here. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you soon, continuing to check up on your wonderful suggestions and whatever else happens in the chess world.